So we know right after the rent law passed, landlords started drafting these lawsuits to challenge the legislation. So let's focus on the lawsuit that still has legs, which was filed by CHIP and the Rent Stabilization Association. That suit alleged that the rent law was unconstitutional because it violated two amendments, the 5th and the 14th. Can you explain what landlords have argued in that suit?
So the lawsuit is challenging New York's rent stabilization law, which, among other things, limits the annual rent increases on nearly 1 million apartments in New York City. The lawsuit you're talking about argues that the law violates the takings clause in the Fifth Amendment, which bars the government from seizing property without properly compensating property owners. The idea here is that landlords are prevented from doing what they like with these properties. For example, the law limits under what circumstances a tenant can be evicted. It guarantees a lease renewal. It grants succession rights to relatives. It limits how many units can be taken over for a landlord's personal use. You get the idea.
Right.
As for the 14th Amendment, the lawsuit alleges that the rent law violates the due process clause by depriving owners of their property. And when we're talking about the due process clause here, we're actually sort of talking about a broader interpretation of the clause than sort of what you would typically think of. So typically you'd hear due process and think, right to your say in a court of law if you're accused of something. Here, What we're talking about is government interference without a significant reason for the interference. So the idea is that landlords are arguing the state government is interfering in their right to own property without a good enough reason to. And the idea is they argue that the rent law, while it's supposed to address the housing crisis in New York, they say it doesn't actually do that. It's an affordable housing program in basically name only is their argument.
Got it. Okay. So we know that landlords have lost that case in two separate courts already. So can you explain what happened there and then how the suit is still alive?
Yeah, so the lawsuit was filed in July 2019, which was actually just a month after the rent law was approved by the state legislature. That district court dismissed the lawsuit in 2020, and the landlords then appealed to the Second Circuit Court. That court also ruled against the landlords in February, basically finding, similarly as the lower courts, that the state has pretty broad authority to regulate rents without violating the Constitution.